Hi, we're Shane and Natalie.
And we like to play board games.
Because we're nerds.
And we're lonely nerds, so we usually just play with the two of us.
And so we like to find games that work for two players. There's some games that are designed for two players, and there's other games which are designed for maybe more, but they might work for two players. Five Tribes is a game which is designed for 2 to 4, but it works for two players, and spoilers, I think it's actually best at 2 players. Mm-hmm. So let's take a quick look at the idea of the game, and then say what we think about it. All right, so Five Tribes is set up with this kind of grid. The setup is a little bit daunting feeling, but it's not that bad. You lay out this 6 by 5 grid. You have these meeples, which you randomly distribute in sets of 3. And then you have the cards here, which are used basically for victory points. And then you have the genies here, which you'll set up 3 of them. They're going to work for you to provide victory points and also maybe some powers throughout the game. Everybody gets a certain amount of money to start the game as well. And that's pretty much how it goes. Now, turn order is going to be determined by bidding. You're going to spend your money to bid in terms of who goes first. We'll talk about that later, though. Once you know who's going to go first, basically, it acts like Mancala, if you've ever played that. You're going to look for these squares, and you're going to choose a square where you're going to pick up all of the meeples on that square. And then, moving orthogonally, so in other words, moving either across or across that way, but not diagonally, you're going to put one meeple on a square going in whatever direction you want, and what you're going to do is you're going to end on another square. And the rule is that you have to end on a square that has meeples of the same color as the one you put down. So this one, I put a green one down because it already has a green. That's going to let you pick up the green or whatever color it is, meeples. And then depending on what color it is that you've picked up, you're going to have a special power or a special action or gain. So let's look at what that is. If you pick up a yellow meeple, so when you pick up yellow meeples at the end, these are viziers, and you're going to put them in front of you, and they count for 1 victory point each at the end of the game. That's pretty much what they do. If you pick up white meeples, these things are, I think, sages or something, and these things also count for points. They count for 2 points at the end of the game. However, you can also spend them on these squares that have the magic genie lamp to purchase genies or to use the genie's special powers. If you pick up the blue, these are called the Builders Guild or something. What that lets you do is it lets you earn money, which again is largely victory points. How does that work? Well, whatever square you finally pick them up from, so say it was this one, you go ahead and you count in a 9 by 9 grid around that square, how many other squares with a blue number there are. So in this case, we'd have 1, 2, 3, 4. And then that acts as a multiplier times however many blue meeples you picked up, you get that much money. If you pick up green meeples, these are the merchants. And what they let you do is purchase, depending on how many you've picked up and all that kind of thing, cards from this selection of cards. Now you always are choosing them from the front, and then you do not refill them until everyone has had their turn for that round. In that case, they all shift down and refill. These cards, depending on how many different ones you have, can be traded in for victory points. The more that you're able to accumulate, the greater your trade-in is worth. And then last, the red meeples are assassins. And what they let you do is kill another meeple. So you can do one of 2 things. You can either, depending on how many you picked up, so let's say I picked up 3 meeples, that would let me count from that spot 3 spaces and kill a meeple from that square. So I could go 1, 2, 3 and kill him, or I could go 1, 2, 3 and kill him, or you could go 1, 2, 3 and get rid of him, whatever. The other thing you can do is you can kill one of your opponent's meeples that they had taken for points. So let's say that I had these 2 yellow meeples here. There are just 2 victory points waiting for me at the end of the game. Natalie goes ahead and uses the assassins. She gets to kill one. All right? That's the gist of the game. You also have, for other ways to get points, some of these squares that have these palm trees on them. If that happens, then you take a palm tree and it goes on there. And that palm tree is going to be worth 3 points at the end of the game. Or if you put a palace down, such as here, then that palace is going to be worth 5 points at the end of the game. But who gets the points? Well, what happens is if you clear out a spot. So let's say that at the end of your turn, you clean out all of the meeples from that spot because they're all the same color. You get to put a camel down, and that is now your square. That's pretty much the game. There's genies that have different passive powers and some active powers. You can read about them all in the rule book. The rule book gives a guide for them because they're all different. They all change.
And the symbols on the cards are not the most intuitive thing to understand.
Okay? And then at the end of the game, you tally up how much money you have. You tally up your victory points from all the different sources. You trade in any of these cards that you have, and you see who wins. The one other rule that has not been discussed, and it really is the key to the game, is the turn order tracker. And so the turn order tracker is this option for you to bid on your turn order. And so, for instance, we can see that this spot says 12. That means somebody could spend 12 money and they put their little pawn there, and that's going to mean that they are going to be able to go potentially first, but then maybe somebody spends 18, and that is the first spot. You can, if you wish, choose to spend 0 to go basically last. Mm-hmm. One of the big differences in a 2-player game is that everybody gets 2 meeples, so everyone gets 2 turns per round. And that's a big part of why this game works so well with 2 players. Because you're always managing this thing about, do I want to do it like this and get 2 turns in a row? Or do I want to try to split my opponent's turns up so that they don't get 2 turns in a row? What's the state of the board? Etc. So that's the game. Let's talk about what we think about it. First things first. First impressions are always important.
It's a beautiful game.
It's a beautiful game. The art is nice. The components feel to be of good quality. The cards, the wood is nice.
The meeples have turbans.
The meeples are nice and thick. The palm trees and the camels and
they don't fall over.
And the palaces feel really nice and chunky. It's all just really enjoyable to kind of interact with and touch and play with. There's nothing that could be said wrong about that thing.
No, they're gorgeous.
So, what do you think about the strategy or tactical side? How thinky is this game?
This game is definitely a very, very thinky game because you're always trying to figure out, what am I going to do on my next turn? Because there's, especially at the beginning of the game, there's so many options. You've got so many different ways you can go here, even with the limiting factors of no diagonals and and you have to end on one with the same color meeple. There's just so many options. You have 90 meeples. It's very thinky. It's very tactical. It's not long-term strategy, but it is very tactical.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. In fact, we're going to jump ahead here. Normally I'd wait a little bit for the how does it work for 2 players thing, but I think that in this game, it's inseparable from how is the strategy and the tactics, because this is a game that for 2 players is fantastic.
It really is.
This game is very highly rated. There's not a lot of complaints about it, but one of the few complaints you do see sometimes is people say, well, the game has too much downtime, and the game is too. It's like there's nothing to do on your turn, or when it's not your turn, and there's not enough meaningful decisions. And I think that comes down to playing with 3 or 4 players. Because when you start the game, right? Or at any time in the game, again, like you said, how many options are there? I could choose these ones, and I could go kind of like 1, 2, 3. I could do that one. I could kind of, try to pick these up. Ooh, if I do this, am I going to be able to come over here and take all these blue? I am. That might be a great play. But maybe I want to instead set something else up for a different play later. Maybe I have my 2 turns in a row so I can set something up for myself. Mm-hmm. In a 3 or 4 player game,
it's harder.
You don't have that.
You don't have the ability to set it up like that.
There's 90 meeples.
Things can change so
There's
drastically.
hundreds or thousands of possible moves. You have 2 or 3 other people that are going to be moving. You have no idea what the board's going to look like.
Yeah.
So I can see that. You can't sit there and think about your move.
Until it's your move.
And so that makes your turn longer, and so everybody else is waiting for you. Mm-hmm. But in a 2-player game, it is beautiful. Because you can, first of all, set it up so that you know exactly what's going to happen next, because you're setting up 2 turns in a row. Or you're looking at your opponent. Mm-hmm. And your opponent, you are looking at what they're doing, you're trying to figure out what they're going to do, and you're coming up with your plan based on what you think they're going to do, and you're spending your whole off turn analyzing the board.
And because what they're going to do is for example, especially if it's set up where you're alternating your turns, they can't change the board that drastically during a single turn. So you can say, okay, well, this is my primary thing, but if they do this, I want to do this one over here. Or if they do this, I can go over here. And even if they have it so that they're going twice in a row in the middle like this, and setting something up for themselves, that's still only 2 turns, and you can usually see, you can make enough plans to accommodate what they're going to do in those 2 turns that are together, because of the fact that there's only one other person going. Yeah.
So with a 2-player game, it's wonderful. You're analyzing everything. You're trying to manipulate this turn order thing so that you get what you need. Sometimes you're trying to make sure that the other player doesn't get what they need. You might have a move you really want to make, but maybe if you make that, you're leaving something open for them. And so that would be bad, right? So maybe you don't want to leave like a spot like this.
Mm-hmm. Because then they get 3 of those. Because
now, they're going to potentially be able to just kind of go, if you have the right setup, which I'm sure it exists somewhere. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Now she claims all of these white meeples, and because she's emptied that, she gets to put a camel on there, and she gets to put a palm tree. She just got 11 points from that square, plus at least 6 more here.
If I don't spend these.
If she doesn't spend them on a genie, which could be worth...
Which also gets points.
Which could be worth even more. So you would never want to leave that situation like that. But maybe you want to leave it that way because... So there's so much decision making. There's so much analysis. So with 2 players, you're always planning. Mm-hmm. And there's no downtime really. And every decision seems like it really matters.
Yeah.
It's very thinky in that way. So if you're not a big into... Now, if you like strategy and kind of long-term planning...
This game isn't going to work for you very well, because there is no way to make plans for your end game in the first turn. There's just no way.
But the tactical decision-making on every single turn and in between 2 turns is phenomenal. So, what about player interaction?
It's there. It's not as great as in Citadels, but it's more than...
Well, it's not as direct as in Citadels.
True.
So, look, there's a lot of indirect interaction. You're like we just talked about. You're trying to plan your move so that you don't leave something for your opponent, right?
But still getting the thing you want.
But you're still getting the thing you want.
Or possibly setting something.
I've in this game taken squares just because I knew that with the particular setup it was going to be better for her to have, and I wanted to keep her from having it. Mm-hmm. I've taken genies I didn't want because I knew with her setup, if she got that genie, that would be like a ton of points for her. Yeah. The game's over. So there's times I've done that. There is that interaction. The most direct thing is if you kill your opponent's meeple.
But honestly, that tends to be the least helpful thing in terms of strategy anyway, because It's not that really all that helpful.
It can be maybe, but it's not such a thing that's not going to be the main thing.
No, the assassins are usually more useful for killing something else.
Yeah, if your opponent kills one of your meeples with the assassin, you might even be happy that that's what they did instead of something else.
Especially like if you have a 2 in a row, you could use the assassins to kill a meeple that's in the way so that then you can clear it the next time. And
you can put your camel down, get the points. So the player interaction, it's not like really direct and in your face, take that kind of mean. No. I don't mean really mean. Everybody has different levels of what they want. But a game like Citadels or like Dominion with some attack cards or certain other games.
It's less kind of like take that.
It's less that.
It's more just being strategic.
But it's way more than in a game like just a regular worker placement game where maybe the most you're going to do is inadvertently take the spot that they needed or that they wanted.
Yeah.
There's a lot more thinking about what your opponent going to do, and there is some intentionality to it.
There's way less like thwarting of your opponent than would happen in, say, viticulture. Viticulture, I think, would have... in viticulture, you might thwart your opponent in terms of taking what their spot is. Yeah, but other than that, there's not much you can do.
But in that game, that game is so tight, you would never really do that just to stop your opponent.
No, you're doing it because you need it. Yeah.
So what I'm saying is this game's more than viticulture.
That's what I was saying.
Okay, so in this game, you might intentionally not do a thing to not leave them something.
Yeah.
You might intentionally take a genie that they
want because you don't want them getting it.
And so you have to think about that too. But you can still do your own thing also.
Yeah, it works
beautifully. And managing this turn order thing is, again, that's such a big part of it. And it takes what was a really strong game and makes it a fantastic game. A top game. One of the, maybe top, on somebody's top 100 list, maybe on a lot of people's. Yeah. It's really worth it. Okay, replayability.
Very high.
Very high.
I think the shortest game we've ever had has been like just under an hour, probably like 45, 50 minutes.
Well,
but the games have never gotten shorter the more we play it.
The more we play it, right. This is not the kind of game, I see what you're saying, where you learn how the game works, and then because you have a certain strategy, you always just do that, and you can execute it really well. This is a game where every game's different.
Every game is different.
There's right now, literally, thousands of moves that you could make. And deciding what's the best one is going to be everything. And so for every game, you have to deal with that. Now, for some people, that might not be the kind of replayability that you're into. But if for a game like, I think chess is a good comparison. It keeps coming up. Because with chess, you're always starting from the same spot. You're not doing that here.
No, this is because the meeples are random and the plates.
But the whole replayability of it is in what moves did your opponent make that game? What moves did you make to try to counter your opponent's moves?
Yeah.
And so that game's been, replayed for hundreds or thousands of years.
At least 1,000 years.
Just because of people trying to not trying to figure it out, but because each game with the same pieces and the same basic setup, it's just different.
Can still be completely different.
Can be completely different. So replayability, I think, is very strong. So overall, 5 Tribes is a great game.
Especially for 2 players.
Especially for 2. Does it work for 3 or 4? I mean, I'm sure it does. People like it. But for the 2 of us,
it's a great option.
It's fantastic for thinking. It's fantastic for interaction. It's fantastic for just that mild little bit of annoyance at the other person. That's kind of a good thing, a good annoyance. And it's just it's a fun experience to just interact with the stuff. The stuff is good too. Yeah. So I would rate this. I mean, we don't normally do like ratings, although we keep talking about it recently, so maybe we will. But I would say this is easily a 10 out of 10. There's the biggest complaint I have about the whole game
is how long it takes to set up.
No, not that, because that's not even that bad. It's not that bad. The biggest complaint I have is that in the box, because of 2-player game uses an extra pawn, right? They give you the pink and the blue one with the extra pawn. I don't like those colors.
But they don't give, for the other two colors.
They just give you one.
Yeah.
So you have to do pink and blue.
Same with the camels, actually, because you use more camels in a two-player game.
So you have to do pink and blue if you want to do, and I just don't like that. But that's I'm saying that.
Minor.
I'm not saying that to nitpick at all. I would never even mention that. I'm mentioning it only to make the point. That's the worst thing about the game, is that I wish the colors of these two pieces were different.
I don't even mind the teal. I just wish it wasn't pink.
The game is that good. So highly recommended. If you are two people who are into games that are at all thinky. I mean, it is heavier than a lot of games. It's not more complex.
Yeah,
it doesn't have all the pieces. It doesn't have 27 phase turns. It doesn't have
The rules are simple, but you still spend a lot of brain power on this game.
It's a lot of brain power game. So, strong game. Really highly recommended. Okay. If you, let us know what you think. And let us know if there's another game that you think would be good for us to look at.
Just don't send us the cooperative games because he won't touch them.
Cooperative games. You know what you can do? We can cooperate in cleaning this up. That'd be a good game. Sure, that's a game. Right. All right. Bye. I'm going to go take an nap while she cooperates here. Yeah. That's not how this works.